Great. Thanks, Chris. And so for those of you that don't know me, good morning. My name is Giles Claydon. I'm the Deputy Programme Manager working into Keith on the programme. I've been involved in the programme probably for the last 6 months and have been heavily involved in the replan for round 3. So have been across the plan end to end. Before we go too much further, also just want to introduce, I've got Keith on the call, and I'll also start off with Jenny saying a few words as well. Jenny Booth, who I'm sure most of you may know, but Jenny is here from Ofgem just to explain, just to communicate a few messages from Ofgem perspective as we go into round 3. So if we can move on to the next slide, please, Joe. So we're just after we finish with a couple of introductions, I'm going to hand over to Jenny, who's just going to spend about 5 minutes just going over currently the perspective from Ofgem as to where the programme currently is and the clear ask from a sponsor perspective. Then I will hand over to Keith, who will talk through the objectives and approach underpinning round 3. And then it will come back to me to provide an overview of the high-level programme plan. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues who are on the call as well, but I'll ask them just for the sake of time to introduce themselves as they go through their particular parts of the brief around each of the phases. And then at the end, we'll have a few minutes just to wrap up the call. In terms of how we propose to manage this morning, we will take questions as we go through. I think that probably leads to a much richer discussion as we go through the playback. There's probably one slight caveat that if we do end up dwelling too long on one particular area, I may close the questions at that point, because I am really keen that through this call, and we have got probably just shy of an hour and a half to do this. Really keen to make sure you get a full appreciation of all the thinking and the rationale that's gone into the current round 3 plan, which I think is from the previous playbacks and the feedback we've had has considerably moved forward some of the detail that we've now got underpinning the plan in the programme. I should also point out as well that we are recording this session, so it will be published on our collaboration base. Just a slight plea from myself. The way Teams seems to work is it will publish the recording. Unfortunately, that recording on the close of this call will sit behind our firewalls, which will be difficult to give you access to. But what we will do, and we will communicate this, we will publish it on the collaboration website over the next day. So I think that is it from myself in terms of just setting up the agenda for this morning. The talks and specific deep dives on each of the phases will focus in primarily on the implementation approach that I'm sure many of you have seen in the artifacts for round 3. There have been one or two areas that we will point out as we go along that we have made some updates and some built out a couple of the slides just in terms of early feedback since mid-December, which I think you will find helpful, and we'll point that out and where we've made any subtle changes as we go through this morning's meeting. So I think with that, Jenny, if I might hand over to you for the Ofgem message, please.
Great. Thanks, Giles. Good morning, everyone. Jenny Booth here, head of HHS in Ofgem. So the key messages really, as everyone knows, this programme is one of the key enablers to get us to our net zero objective, and that of us and of obviously BEIS. So with that in mind, BEIS have a keen interest in this programme because they do see it as a platform through which a number of their strategic programs could be delivered, thinking of the flexibility approach and so on. Suffice to say, BEIS are quite keen to see this program implemented as soon as practicable. With that in mind, it is really the onus is on us and everyone in the market to utilize these sessions to raise their concerns or observations to ensure that the program do have the necessary data that they can utilize to come to the conclusion on a very credible and, from our perspective, the fastest possible plan to deliver the new arrangements. Therefore, I guess the key message here is for the industry to provide the necessary granularity of data for the program, so the program can do the detailed optional analysis. It's safe to say that the plan is likely to come, more than likely, will come to Ofgem for approval. And one of the things we will be checking and challenging is things like the timeframes and so on. Is there a robust rationale for the timeframes to be as they are? As I said, we will be putting that in front of BEIS and others, and the more robust and credible the plan is, the easier it is for us to stand behind it when we explain to parties why the timeline is as such. So the key message is utilize these sessions and please respond to the consultation with as much detailed data as you can. I think that's all I need to say, Giles. If anyone wants to ask me any questions, please do.
No, I don't think we got any questions, so I think we will move on. Jenny, thank you. Keith, over to you.
Yep, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good to see so many people on the call. So the just by way of introduction, a lot of this you will have seen before, but just to reiterate it for the context of this session, as Jenny mentioned, it's important to get this plan right and rapidly delivering this programme, but in an achievable way. So in bearing in mind the kind of material risks and issues that we have and challenges the programme will have. So the consultation is about working with industry to get a consensus. This is always been badged as a programme which is, you know, industry led, and therefore it's important that the programme takes into account all of the concerns and inputs, and the consultation is absolutely the right process in which to do that. So the objectives of this plan, planning consultation, will be to consult on this plan. The plan, we've made it very clear. We've made it very black and white in terms of dates, and in order for you to allow us to understand the impact of this plan on yourselves, and by replying to the round 3 consultation, we should get a good sense of the impact of this plan on you and any concerns that you might have, and actually therefore the achievability and how realistic the plan might be. So we're doing that. We're also trying through the round 3 consultation to understand participants' readiness and progress in terms of DBT, and therefore we are asking for evidence in the way of plans or timelines to help us understand that, and that will be part of the M3 sign-off that will come back to PSG later this calendar quarter. And we want to assess interest in SIT participation because that's absolutely critical for the success of the delivery, and we will be going into quite a lot of specifics around SIT and how it works and how it's going to be managed in this session, because this is one of the areas Giles referred to in terms of providing more clarity, and hopefully that will be helpful today. So the consultation will conclude at the end of the month. We have asked for participants to reply by the 16th, i.e. by the beginning of next week, if they are interested in SIT, although we recognise that there will be participants who are interested in SIT who will take longer to reply. And to be clear, we prefer to have a good, well thought out quality response. So if that means that you take longer to do it, if you don't reply until the back end of this month, but you want to be in SIT, I prefer, and we would prefer, a fulsome and high quality response than something that's rushed. Joe, if you could move on to the next slide, please. So you will understand that there are planning artifacts we've sent out. The implementation approach is a new artifact, and the reason for that, of course, is that we want to give you the helicopter view on the plan, the end-to-end view, the thinking behind how all of these phases join together. So that's the first document that probably is helpful in setting the context for the plan. And then we've provided updates on the programme schedule the milestone dependencies, the milestone register, and the RAID. And they're pretty much heavier documents than we're in round 1 and round 2. Round 1 and round 2 were more about getting you familiar with the thinking and the plans and making a lot of assumptions about how this plan will be delivered. Round 3 will be, it's a lot heavier, but actually we want through this quarter for the plan to start following the conversations in the working groups. So it's really important that SIT working group, qualification working group, all of the relevant working groups should be working through bottom up the detailed ways in which the delivery will happen and getting good consensus across the experts in each of those working groups. So it's really important as we go through this quarter that the plan starts to follow the working group, if you like, policy making in terms of these details. And therefore, when we get to a re-baseline plan, it should be based on those progressed conversations in the working groups. If they've reached conclusions, they'll be baked into the replan. If they're reaching conclusions, then hopefully the assumptions we make in any baseline plan will be fewer and they'll be less impactful. So the ideal situation is that most of this stuff gets worked out in detail through working groups, and then the replan will reflect those conversations and agreements. So that's what we want. In line with code obligations, we expect everybody to reply to this consultation, and we will be informing programme steering group about the participants who have and haven't responded, because it is really critical. This is, as I say, an industry-led programme that needs your involvement. For this session particularly, I'd like to ask you to focus on the fact that this session is about getting, the outcome should be that you fully understand and appreciate what the plan represents. I recognise there are particular risks and issues and challenges for the people on this call in relation to delivery. And we have, for that reason, we've set up a delivery review next week on the 19th, where we will talk about risks and issues in detail and how we might jointly resolve and address those. So whilst today we'll take you through the plan, and I'm very happy if you want to headline the main concerns you have about it, we're not going to go into solutionising or looking about how we're going to address those concerns. We'll do that next week. So happy to kind of raise things that you want to cover next week in terms of how we're going to manage the delivery. But this is mainly about you understanding the plan and asking questions about the plan so that you have a good setup for that more detailed conversation next week if you're able to join. I think I'll stop there. Giles.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Keith. We've got a question from Steve.
Yeah, good morning, Steve Mitchell from UK Power Networks. I'll put my hand up, and I think you just answered the question as I put it up about the meeting next week.
Yes.
I'm assuming the invites haven't yet gone out for that, because I don't think we've had any at UK Power Networks.
Have you not? I put a placeholder out to Chris and Jenny, so it's a question of whether they've been forwarded to the relevant people at this stage. So
say, Keith, it's Chris cutting in then. We haven't forwarded it, and it was a question of whether it's going to come out direct, because even this meeting now, I didn't have this one, so I was trying to, that was going to be one of my questions of who's leading on communicating, if you like. So I didn't have this one that the DNOs did, and the DNOs haven't got the other one, it seems. So I can forward it, or I can give you the list. Do you want the contact list?
If you give me the list, we can forward it, or you can forward it to the people you think are most relevant in the DNOs community. Chris, we thought you could do that because you make sure that we cover it properly. For clarity, it is on the 19th between 1:30 and 3.
Okay, thanks.
I think Jenny, you forwarded it to iDNOs, haven't you?
I have, yes.
Yes, I've had a number of acceptances. Thank you.
And we have, thank you. We got a second question from Catherine Duggan.
Hi, thanks for that. I do recognise that, you know, you want to run a list of risk and impacts for that meeting next Thursday. It was just a request. Could you please issue that log so we've got time to read it and understand and come prepared, so we can make the best use of the time next Thursday? So just a plea, could you get that out probably by the end of this week, and then we can have a chat about it within our constituency categories and just come prepared? That would be great.
By end of this week, you mean tomorrow?
Yeah.
Well, if they're not already in the RAID artifact that we issued, then we can prepare something, Catherine, for for Thursday. It might be Monday before we get that out to you, to be quite honest with you.
No, that's great. If by the close of play Monday, just something that we know what's going to be discussed next Thursday, then we can come pre-armed and we can make best use of the time.
Well, we can certainly tell you what we have on our radar. It may be you come with other stuff, and that's fine as well.
Well, I think you just said on this call we're able to raise things maybe at the end.
Oh, yes, certainly
the things we
raised today. Absolutely. I mean, we're aware of quite a lot of raid items already, of course. But if there are any ones that you'd like to raise for next week, great. We'll definitely flip those out as part of the output. Yes, I agree.
Perfect.
Sorry, I misunderstood you. Thank you.
Okay. So if there are no further questions, I will now move on to just providing an overview of the high level program plan. So many of you will have seen that in the implementation approach, a plan that probably looks very similar to this. Probably just to declare now, based on one or two minor errors that we had in here and feedback, we have updated this because we believe the clarity that this provides, I think, will be useful as you go further forward through the round 3 consultation. So just to give you just a brief point to where we have made 2 or 3 changes. If you look into the milestones, we've been absolutely clear here around, and I'm just going to go onto a bigger screen, so forgive me just 1 minute where I can read this better. We have been clear around the start of the migration at M11 and M12 that is now 18 months. It's we have, that is one of the changes that we've made, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through today between round 2 and round 3 about providing an 18-month window. The second change on here relates to the critical path 3, where we had an error previously that said July 25. That now says September 25, and that's in the top right-hand box there. And I'll talk about the critical paths in a minute. And then the final change is an additional swim lane, which I will talk through as well, which is just to draw out what was previously in the more detailed Microsoft project plans that are in the that are in the artifacts. But given that, I think, through the focus on this, and particularly the focus today, we have added an additional swim lane in that sort of off-red burgundy colour called non-sit LDSO testing, and I'll talk about that shortly. So just to declare that there have been 1 or 2 changes to this plan, but keen during the next few minutes just to give you an overview about how the overall end-to-end plan fits together, the interdependencies between the area, because as we go on further through the presentation, we'll focus in on each of these swim lanes in turn. Chris, I think you've got your hand up, or is that an old hand?
Yeah, hi. This is because I'm just thinking of the conversation that you had. I listened into the software one the other day.
Yes.
And the same questions came up. So I've got it on a big screen in a meeting room and I still can't see it. And there was various advice as to how you can see the details. I think you guys didn't zoom in, but there was a whole load of stuff in the background. I'm just wondering if it's worth, if you're able to, well, I don't know whether I'm on my own, but it's actually quite small, not easy to read. And somebody did say something about a pop-out or pop-out or something, but
actually the best way, Chris, is just control scroll. I'm doing it right now. Actually, you can, if you press control and you scroll wheel on your mouse, it will zoom.
That's fine. Operator error on my side. I'm quite happy to admit that. Thanks.
And hopefully, Chris, we've been honest with the changes that were recommended as well, but you can be the test of that in a minute. Chris, is there anything else on the plan from your side, or can I move on to Jackie?
No, nothing for me. Sorry, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Jackie.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether you're going to come on to this in a moment, but I see there's also, you've got the commencement of SIP functional cycle 2 in there, which was not on the artifact that was sent out with the round 3 consultation. So to the right where you've got the what's that called, where it's just drawing out the stages and the stage exits and the basis for duration.
Okay. We actually have got some additional materials to show you around the cycles of SIT as well. I think probably, and that is, I think that's true. To be honest, in this diagram, I'm not sure that we had added that in without me going back and cross-referencing between them being issued. But I'll take your word for it if we have, Jackie. But hopefully that provides you more clarity.
Shall I pick that up, Giles? It's just, Jackie. Yeah. So that is, and Dom will cover it in the SIT slide later. But it's the start of that LDSO testing. The trigger for the start of that is the end of the first cycle of SIT, because at that point we will have a level of stability of the systems and processes to give us some confidence that we can enter into the LDSO testing cycle. So that's why it's identified as stage entry in here, and Dom will talk about it a bit more about in the SIT plan.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Jenny.
Yeah, Giles, have these been reissued, or is it the intention to reissue them?
No, this will be reissued with the materials, with the recording after this meeting. There are versions online because we've actually used this updated slide for the previous playbacks that are available to you, but this would also go up against this session when we publish it on the collaboration base after the meeting.
And will that include a summary of the changes that you've just outlined?
Yes, there is a summary actually, and again, you may not see it particularly well on the screen here, but the box at the top in red covers the amendments here, and we'll use this red box throughout where we've added additional materials.
Okay, thanks, Giles.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Chris?
Yeah, sorry, I did have one now you've come on to this. So I've had a few questions from people. So we've got the various phases of SIT. So when you go through it, I'm wondering whether you could just clearly articulate what systems are being added, well, what systems are included in each stage of SIT from the beginning, because it starts obviously on here at the end of October 31, and it goes on and it goes on, and you've got the multiple phases. So the questions have been around, okay, so we've got MPRS, but you might have adapters coming in at some point, and all the other systems, and whether the other DNO systems are or aren't included, and at what point we're interested.
Chris, if I may ask you just to keep the level of, it sounds like they're quite detailed questions, so we'll keep those back to when Dom and Nigel talk through the SIT testing phase, if I may, because I just really was keen just to give an overview to set the sort of the overall framework of the plan and the structure of the plan.
Absolutely fine. It was more that some of the questions in the thing are about, well, are you ready? Are you going to be ready? What's going to happening? So they're all trying to get all the ducks lined up. So thanks.
Cool. And we're making an assumption that the right people are going to things like the SIT working group and the qualification working group, where a lot of these details are probably being discussed at this stage and are ongoing. So, we want to make sure that some of the answers we give today might be, well, actually, we've got to this point in the working group and it will be discussed there more. So there'll be an element of that as well, I imagine.
So, if I may, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what the plan that as shown here, just to sort of pull out some of the key features of the plan. So, you've probably seen at the top right-hand box, and I've just out in terms of one of the slight error corrections that we've had. We've mapped out on here three critical paths that essentially the different participants can take in order to reach migration. Now, the first and critical path, which is it's just shown by the sort of emboldened dashed line, the line on the left, that really follows the path through for those participants that elect to go through for SIT, and how those participants will actually be the earliest participants who will reach migration. And that is on the basis that participants that volunteer for SIT will essentially have done the equivalent testing to qualification, with one exception relating to the self-assessment document, the SAD document, that essentially looks at the wider back-end operation and business processes. So the first line there, which is shown actually entitled CP2, follows that process through and shows the earliest entry into migration around April 2005. The next fastest route are for those participants that don't elect to do SIT but elect to follow the entry through the qualification route, and the more finely dashed line there, CP3, shows the earliest opportunity based on assumptions that I will talk about in a minute around qualification, in terms of the first tranche going through qualification, and then forming and then going into migration. The final path that we show through here are essentially for the final tranche that we have that goes through qualification, and we have approximately 7 tranches in our working assumption. We seem to have lost the screen, Joe. Joe, are you sharing the PowerPoint still, or is it just my screen that it's been lost on?
No, it has been lost.
Okay. Joe, are you with us? You come off mute. Bit difficult to describe this without it being projected.
Sorry, Giles, my connection seems to have cut out temporarily there. Let me just reshare screen. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Giles, if there's a continuing issue, I can always share screen, but let's see how we go.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Jason. I would have shared mine, but I think I'd have lost faces and questions, which is why I was not doing that. So the final critical path, CP1 here, shows the path through the programme for those participants that go into qualification in the final tranche. And essentially, this path is the slowest path through the programme, and for the purist amongst us, the critical path through to the new settlement code as well. So migration ends, all the paths converge at that migration end. So just to step you through each of the phases as they're shown here, we are currently in the really heavily focused on the system design and build stage. In particular, the focus presently is for those parties that will form the central parties. And through round 3, we are, as you'll be aware, asking people to elect for whether they want to participate in SIT. And through this, through the round 3, we'll identify our SIT participants, and they will also come into this focus of SI assurance. And Paul will talk to us in a bit more detail in the next session around that. The main focus here is to get those central parties and SIT participants into component integration testing, starting at the end of October, and that essentially is the first major phase in the SIT testing as shown here. We pass through the participants pass through SIT, and the major focus in SIT is to get the functional testing complete, so that we can prove the environment for UIT that's needed in order to stand up and support the qualification testing. And as mentioned, these are formed into the current working assumptions and quite advanced working assumptions. This is formed into 3 cycles, and that will be covered off more when we come to the SIT deep dive later on. Of particular interest, I know, to everybody on this call will be the non-SIT LDSO testing that we show here, and this is a difference that needs to be discussed through in more detail, and will be, I'm sure, the focus of the conversations today and, of course, next week. But this is a recognition on the programme side that in order to go into migration, we do require all LDSOs nationally to have completed their pre-migration testing as an equivalent to the qualification stage, and to make sure that a sufficient evidence has been gathered through the testing to prove that qualification can take place. Paul, I can see your hand up. Noted. If you could just let me just get to the end of the overview, I'll come back to you. So that's that covers the burgundy chevron there, and the testing that will need to take place with LDSOs. As I mentioned, once SIT function is complete, that proves and stands up the environment for qualification. Qualification is essentially a 12-month window that qualification will take place, and again, these assumptions need to be worked through, in particular with Elexon, because actually we're at slight arm's length from the programme around the governance and the process that will take place through qualification. But for each of the tranches, we will have 6 tranches. We'll have 7 tranches, each of notionally 6 months duration, and there's additional couple of months around that for the Programme Assurance Board governance for both entry and exit from the qualification stage. By the time all parties qualify, all parties will need to have completed DBT1 and DBT2. But probably what I should just draw out is that the entry criteria for both SIT and for qualification is completion of PIT at the end of the system design and build stage, and that's something that is the focus for the SI QA assurance. In terms of qualification, you'll see here that actually the critical paths of the first tranche of qualification is about 6 months later. And that represents a clear advantage for participants electing to go through for SIT, and an incentive for SIT participants to have that first earlier adopter advantage. In the next green swim lane, we've got the regulatory code drafting areas. I'm not going to dwell on this in too much detail, and Jason will cover this off. But these activities, given the spacing here, are easy to see that they are not on the critical path. But I think the most important milestone here is the need for us to lock the code changes finally at M8 as a precursor to going into migration. Migration is now scheduled to take place over an 18-month window. At the start of this is the SIT MVC participants, the minimum viable cohort participants that will be in that first drop into migration. And then other later SIT participants can come into migration, then followed in succession by the tranches as they roll off qualification. So the window has been extended to 18 months. That's based on some new modelling that Aid will talk about later on. At the end of migration, we've got a 2-month gap, or a minimum of a 2-month gap here for the systems to settle. Before we then look to go into the new settlement code, and the timing of that is a window at the moment, and that needs to be worked through, and Jason will discuss that more later on. So I'm going to stop there. That's a very quick gallop, I appreciate, through the plan, but very keen to show how the interdependencies and relationships between the phases fit together. I can see we've got a couple of questions. Paul Band?
Yep, hi. With regards to volunteering for SIT, it's likely that we will ask our service providers to volunteer for SIT, but one of those service providers will be an adapter provider, and we have not yet got to the point where we've made any decisions around what that adapter looks like or who's going to provide it. And I'm sort of struggling in my mind as to how we can commence SIT if we've got that key component not yet defined.
I think we'll discuss this more when we get to the SIT, because I think we've got some useful materials to bring in there. But I might just ask Dom briefly if you just want to talk to that now, or when you get to your section.
Apologies, I missed the question there. What was the question?
I think it was around adapters, Dom, and I think Paul, if you're going to use an adapter as part of your infrastructure to provide the services for registration, UMSO and JAWS billing and network operations, then we'll need it there for SIT, and similarly for the LDSO testing in the maroon band, because it's part of the overall service provision. I think that the question was about providing the adapter, Dom. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, we would expect the adapters to be there within the mix in SIT.
And that's fair enough. But the point I'm trying to make is that, and I think hopefully the other DNOs will excuse me for speaking on their behalf, but I don't think any of us have yet reached the point where we've appointed an adapter service provider. So giving you an answer as to who will participate in SIT, we're not in a position to do that at this point in time.
I think it's around having a plan in order to procure and have that adapter provider ready in time, and having confidence on having it ready for the entry, Paul. I think we don't necessarily need that contracted now, but it's about confidence in having it ready and available for the start of the appropriate testing phases.
Okay, thank you.
It feels like it may be one of the risks to maybe draw out for next week's meeting, I think. Okay, Steve.
Thanks, Charles. I've zoomed in as much as I can, and it's a bit blurry, so apologies. The purple line to do with the non-SIT LDSO testing.
Yes.
Is that July 24, and is that meant to be January 25?
No, it's slightly, it is January 25. It's the 24th of January 25.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's the American toggling. Sorry, we've used an application that I'm afraid doesn't.
That's fine. Yeah, I say it's partly because the monitor isn't that clear. Thanks.
Hazel.
Hi, it's just a follow on from Paul's comments, and just to give some confidence back to the programme that some DNOs and iDNOs have reached out to adapter providers, and those early conversations are taking place.
Okay, thanks, Hazel. That's useful to know. Okay, I'm conscious we've still got quite a lot of materials to get through, so I'm going to move on now. Is there another question coming through? No, sorry, it's your old hand, Hazel. Sorry. Was that a new question? So I'm going to move on now into a deep dive into each of the phases. So if we can move on, please, Joe. So we're going to start off with design, build and test, and I'm going to hand over to Paul.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Pettit. I head up the LDP design team. What I'm going to talk about for just a couple of minutes ahead of my colleague Nigel is just about the design phase. Obviously, we're doing work with participants across the programme now, getting questions and hopefully resolving questions that are coming in as they start to get involved in their design. And to that end, what I want to do just to give you an update. Obviously, the design itself and the work-off plan is going to DAG now on the 1st of February for approval. As part of that, what will happen, the design will be, and the baseline artifacts will be uplifted, and they'll be made available on the collaboration base, hopefully on the 8th of February. And to support this, this is going to be augmented by a number of design artifacts that we've been developing to basically provide extended views of the design tailored to you as specific individuals, whether it be LDSO suppliers, etc., to enable you to better understand the design and navigate your way around that design. We're there really to provide support to you in your design and build. We will be carrying out, Giles mentioned at the beginning, design assurance on behalf of part of the programme. And this is basically forming an independent view of participants' readiness. As I said, we want everyone to succeed and help them through your pit testing, succeeding through your sit testing. So we're going to be contacting certainly the MVCs and those that are nominating themselves to go into sit, to basically work with you and understand your design, how your approach, to find out and basically ensure that you've correctly identified all the business processes, all the interfaces that you need to do to undertake your role. So we'll be there to really support you going through this process. We're already doing that at the moment. I think many of you have started to use the design mailbox, design at mhhsprogram.co.uk. We will be issuing some guidance in the next month, so probably February, about the assurance process and what that entails. But it's an opportunity to basically work with us, let us help you get ready for pit, sit, and basically better understand the design. So on that note, I'll now hand over to Nigel, who will take you through the DBT1 and DBT2 phases if there's no questions, but happy to answer any, obviously.
Thanks, Paul.
Over to you, Nigel.
Cheers, thank you. So I'm Nigel Hunt. I work in the SI in the testing work stream. So I'm going to talk a bit about the T in DBT. So it's the PIT testing, the pre-integration testing, DBT1. So DBT1, this is it's the precursor of testing before you go into CIT. It will include the design, build, and test of all the sort of market interfaces and the scope as Paul just described that he was supporting the assurance of. We will be providing a pre-qualification guidance on this. So this is coming out at the end of the month. This will show what's expected in PIT and how we will assure and support you through that process. So there's DBT2. So DBT1 obviously is a precursor, must be complete as part of entry into CIT. I think Don will explain how that works and how that entry handshake works later, but it is a precursor to that. DBT2, I think was mentioned earlier, it must be complete by the end of qualification prior to migration, and this involves testing sort of back end systems and consequential change. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Joe? So again, this is a description of what we expect in PIT. So if we look at the bottom left and work across, it would involve functional testing, any non-functional requirements, again, drawn out from the RTM that's been described, and a regression that's required following that testing prior to going into CIT. It's the responsibility of each of the participants for their own systems, the test environments, test data, the scenarios and the scripts, the test process as whatever that is within each of the participants' delivery areas, and the management tool and associated defect management process. From an assurance perspective, we'll be looking for a PIT approach and test plan up front. When it says here requirements traceability matrix, that's a requirements test traceability matrix, which sits on top and is on top of the requirements traceability from the bit that Paul's talked about. We will check your PIT scenarios and test scripts are sufficient for this. We're expecting regular execution test reports. And finally, and most importantly, obviously the PIT test completion report, which will assure, again, in order to make sure you're ready to go into the CIT. I'd like to make it clear here that the PIT guidance is not just for the sort of SIT work stream, but it's and SIT swim lane, but also for qualification. So we're working alongside the co-delivery bodies, and we will be sharing this and making sure they're aligned, because the processes will be the same. So whether you want to go through SIT process or whether you want to go through qualification, the PIT is a precursor to that sort of end-to-end testing, integrated testing piece required in both areas. Could we go on to the next slide, please? That was it from a high level. Pit, are there any questions for me?
No,
if not, thank you very much.
Yep, thanks, Nigel. So we're now going to move on to system integration testing. So Dom, I'll hand over to you. If you just introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Giles. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Dominic Mooney, and I'm the LDP SIT lead. So system integration testing is going to comprise of two core elements. So as Nigel's just mentioned, we are expecting pre-integration testing to have been evidenced ahead of SIT, and it is one of the key entry criteria. Just to be clear, that is the DBT1 pit testing, and that will apply to all the central systems, suppliers, core systems and DIP interfaces, metering services, data services and registration, network operations and UMSO services. Obviously, this will be executed in your own environments, but will be a prerequisite to enter into SIT. And then there's the systems integration testing itself, which is going to be scenarios that are specified by the SI, and will be designed to demonstrate functional, non-functional, migration-related characteristics of the market interfaces and services in a fully integrated SIT environment. And there will be a number of those environments, which I'll come on to. So participants are expected to produce the test artifacts that Nigel's just been through, but also required to demonstrate test environment network connectivity prior to the commencement of SIT component integration testing, and will be responsible for defining detailed test steps which sit beneath the scenarios and scripts that the SI will be producing. The SI will assure test readiness of SIT entrance, will provide an overarching test approach for each stage, and we're developing those for the CIT and functional test phases currently within the SIT working group. There will also be an overarching test approach and plan, which is being developed in the data working group, but there'll also be a stage-specific test data approach and plan as well within SIT. As I say, we'll be specifying the scenarios and scripts. Again, these will be based on the MHHS design and will be developed within the SIT working group. We'll be verifying, obviously, that the exit criteria has been met, and there will be a level of assurance for all SIT participants, and we'll be assuring the SIT execution results during the SIT stages as they're executed. We'll be ensuring the availability of test harnesses, test environments and data against which each participant will test in SIT. We'll be providing overarching management of the SIT process and schedule, so that will be day to day. And we'll also be providing access and training guidance to the program's test management tool, which is iDNO. And also overall defect issue and management for all the centrally raised issues, including their triage, and this will also involve any environment related defects. Associated SI deliverables, I've mentioned the approach and plan, the test data approach and plans. We'll also be asking participants to produce a stage readiness report, and then the SI will produce an overarching readiness report, and there'll also be a defect management plan and test management tool user guide. Sorry, I'm not sure who's driving the slides. Is it Joe? If you just move us on, please. Sorry, I don't know whether that's frozen on anyone else's machine.
I think it's Joe. Minimum viable cohort should have come up.
Okay, yep, that's come up now. So central to the SIT approach is we're going to be looking to establish a minimum viable cohort of participants as early as possible. This minimum group of SIT participants is needed to enable us to exercise the SIT coverage in a coordinated manner as soon as possible. That said, we are asking for SIT volunteers that, if they're not part of that minimum viable cohort, they'll still be supported through SIT execution, and therefore will be able to get into migration at an earlier point. the purpose of the MVC is to, as I say, to exercise the coverage as quickly as possible, and proof of a successful SIT exit will be based on that MVC coverage having been successfully completed. The composition of the MVC is going to be all providers of the central systems, and then also one of each of the following, which is St Clement's and the iDNOs, obviously providing the MPRS, iDNOs providing network operations services and UMSO services, and supplier agents. And then we'll also be looking for 2 of each service provider type, and 2 of the suppliers. So on the right hand side of the slide here, which went out with the pack, is a number of kind of principles and planning assumptions associated with SIT. But what I'm going to do is, based on feedback, just flip onto the next slide, which hopefully is going to give kind of the steps for entering SIT and how we'll then execute. So we've mentioned the milestone at the end of January, and for participants to come back on the consultation. If anyone can advise us earlier on by the 16th of their intention to enter SIT, that'd be great. But if you respond by the end of SIT, if you respond by the end of January, you'll still be accepted into the SIT phase once we've assured, obviously, delivery plans. There'll be a milestone in April where, once we've assured those delivery plans, we'll be confirming the SIT candidates. And at this point, there'll be no distinction between the MVC or other SIT participants that will be involved in SIT. All SIT participants we're looking to integrate during the SIT CIT phase. We're going to be starting first with the DIP and Helix. We'd like to then bring in MPRS and then other roles progressively through the SIT CIT stage at 2-week intervals. This is something that's being developed, this sequence of progressive integration, in the SIT working group. And if you want more information on that, I would suggest that you have a look at the materials that have been sent out for SIT working group this week. We will continue to develop that and the approaches and plans in the SIT working group. So, highly recommend attending that working group to get involved in that process. As we've mentioned, all PPs will be expected to demonstrate PIT completion and SIT readiness prior to SIT CIT commencement. So that readiness will incorporate not only the PIT, it will involve environment connectivity. If there's test data that needs to be loaded into the environment, we'll be looking for that to be done and for that to be verified, and the SI will assure that. I've mentioned the test steps and also onboarding onto the test management tool. Once we've got through SIT CIT, we're not currently planning in the round 3 plan to include any further PPs into the SIT testing. So the last point at which we're going to be accepting SIT participants into the plan is the 29th of January, which is the end of CIT minus 2 weeks. Following that, we'll move into functional testing, and we'll be looking to establish that MVC as the composition of which was on the previous slide. We will then monitor the progress, and we'll form the MVC based on the number of tests that have been successfully executed, and we'll obviously take into consideration any severity 1 and 2 defects. And then we'll continue to maintain that MVC through periodic reviews. To a degree, we could be dynamic in terms of the composition of the MVC in terms of different parties. So if any parties in the MVC fall behind, or parties in the other SIT participant swim lane are kind of moving faster, then we do have a degree of opportunity to kind of move things around a bit to keep the progress moving. In terms of scheduling, as I say, what we're looking to do is execute the SIT coverage as soon as possible, flush out all of the defects, gain as much confidence in the solution design as early as possible. But we will continue, and we will prioritise the schedule in order to achieve that objective. But we will continue to support SIT participants alongside the MVC, and will provide additional support within the SIT environment so that those participants can conclude all of their test coverage by the 7th of April 25. We have also got an environment that we're looking to set up for migration testing, non-functional and operational testing. We're recommending that other SIT participants look to start the execution for those stages at the same time so that we can avoid scheduling conflicts between those testing stage objectives. But again, we will continue to support those testing objectives for other participants up until the 7th of April. And just to point out, any SIT participant that drops out of SIT would then need to proceed via the non-SIT route. But we have been in discussions with the code delivery bodies about, were that to occur, there will be some credit, obviously, for any testing execution that has been undertaken within the SIT phase. So, sorry.
Dominic, sorry to butt in, just a quick question on that before you move on. And it's Steve Marshall, UK Power Networks.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, hi.
What happens if, as a result of a participant dropping out, you go below the minimum cohort specified in the earlier slide?
So, yeah, obviously that's a risk. I think we're going to have to keep a close eye on all participants within the MVC to make sure that they're coming along. This is one of the reasons why we're opening out SIT to not just a minimum viable cohort from an earlier selection point, because hopefully if we've got more volunteers, then we have an opportunity to actually, as I say, be slightly more dynamic and maybe bring in another participant into the MVC. Now, in some cases, that's going to be, that's not going to be possible. So the central systems, for instance, are obviously key and critical to the MVC. So any delay or any issues associated with those participants, we're just going to have to prioritise the resolution of those issues.
Steve, we are doing some contingency planning on what the options might be if we didn't have the MVC critical components. So yeah, that's obviously, as Dom said, it is a key risk, and we're just looking at our options at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll go into the next slide, which is a POAP depicting this. So you can see on the left-hand side there, we've got different swim lanes for the different SIT stages. So I mentioned the SIT CIT execution phase there, which is running from the 30th of October to the 9th of Feb 24. As I say, the approach that we're developing the SIT working group is a progressive integration of role types into that stage, but we'll be integrating all SIT volunteers and participants in that particular stage, and that will lead us on to the SIT functional testing start. Again, at the beginning of that phase, there's no distinction between an MVC or other participants. It will, really be about who's executing at the fastest pace, most successfully, and with the least number of defects. So the intention is that we're going to break down SIT functional into 3 cycles. The intention being in cycle 1 that we execute as much of the coverage as possible and flush out and resolve any key defects that have come out of that testing, acknowledging that there may be some issues, some blocking issues that prevent us from executing all testing, but we've included 2 subsequent cycles 2 and 3, to then resolve those, with the intention of reaching a milestone on the 21st of October 24, where we've executed all core systems and we can institute a core systems code freeze. And then subsequent to the code freeze, running a regression test with an aim to have completed SIT functional testing for the MVC by the 3rd of January 25. And then, as you can see there, there's additional time within the functional testing stage for other participants to continue to be supported to conclude their test coverage. And then in the sorry, just on the top right hand corner, we've got a table there that shows the different environments that we're going to be utilizing in SIT. So the main environment for the functional testing is going to be SIT A, where we're going to be carrying out the SIT, CIT and functional test stages. We're going to be requiring that environment to be up and running in readiness for the start of CIT. We then also have a SIT staging environment, which the intention for that environment is for mainly the core systems to retest any defect fixes in an integrated environment and any associated regression testing ahead of deployment of that code into the main SIT A environment. And we're requiring that environment to be up and running for the start of SIT functional testing. The intention for that is really a lessons learned from faster switching, that we want to make sure that we've got confidence in fix releases for the core systems before we deploy them into the SIT A environment, so that we can mitigate any delays with environment builds causing issues in the main environment. We're going to have quite a tight schedule there. So we've got a question from Hazel.
Hi, sorry to interrupt your flow. I get everything what you've just said. The question is about the connectivity testing, which my understanding is that's 12 weeks before the start of CIT.
That's right, yeah. So, and we've just been discussing that this morning on the Environment Working Group. So we've put in a milestone for participants that are going to be involved in SIT to indicate that their environments are set up, they've got their certificates ready, and that we're going to run through some very basic connectivity testing to prove that the environment and the PKI infrastructure is all working. Again, we've put it in quite a bit ahead of time from the component integration testing because of lessons learned from faster switching, really, that issues relating to certificate issue can be quite difficult to resolve and can be quite, in terms of elapsed time, can take quite a long time to resolve as well. And so what we want to do is mitigate those kinds of issues creeping into the component integration testing stage, where I believe the experience on faster switching was there was a certain amount of smoke testing, which was designed to with the objective that we're putting into our connectivity testing stage. We don't want that to eat into the objectives of the CIT phase, which is going to be more broader in scope in terms of testing each of the interfaces for all of the participants involved in SIT. Hence why we've put that as a longer lead time on the plan. We're getting a bit of feedback via the Environment Working Group on that. We've said that we will provide a bit more detail on exactly what the nature of that connectivity testing is in the next version of the environment's approaching plan, which is going to be issued out at the end of this month.
Thank you for that very detailed answer. I do take on board everything you said. For the faster switching program, that connectivity testing was probably a couple of days, probably not 12 weeks. But for those parties going into SIT, it then eats into their PIT time. So it's absolutely, and it's I suppose it's which party feels the pain. But yeah, thank you. Yeah,
I mean, I acknowledge we don't expect to need 2 months for each party to actually execute the testing. I think what we're trying to do there is acknowledge that we may have some issues that need to be resolved that take some time. So the testing won't be exhaustive, but as the nature of it is, if it doesn't work, then it's all about the resolution of those issues.
Yeah, absolutely, brilliant. Thank you for your time.
Another question there from Chris.
Yeah, hi. Just building on what Paul said earlier and what Hazel just said now, if you're going to do connectivity testing, I assume that's with the adapter.
Yes, it would need to be, yeah.
The adapter obviously interfacing. So when does that mean that you need the adapter ready by? Without, I'd rather ask you than try and figure it out in my head. 12 weeks prior to So where does that take you?
So within the plan, I think we said it's around about the 24th of July. We'd be expecting you to provide us with the statement that your environments are ready to start performing that connectivity testing. Now, as with the start of CIT, we're basically looking for you to respond back to the consultation with whether that's something you can achieve or not.
Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure I'd understood that right.
Can't see any more questions, so I'm going to move on. So then we've got a SIT-B environment where we're looking to execute the migration testing, non-functional testing, and operational testing stages. And we acknowledge that for some participants that where the migration design is not yet complete, that there may be a need for their migration-related PIT to go on beyond the start of CIT. So we acknowledge that. So we've built in later dates for when we're expecting to see evidence of that PIT testing having completed. We're looking to start with migration testing. Currently within the plan, we've got a degree of overlap between NFT and SIT ops, but we will look to manage that via scheduling if we need those overlaps. And as with functional testing, we'll also provide continued support for other participants up until the 7th of April 25. I've also depicted on here, which I'm not sure was on the original pack that went out with round 3, just how this testing relates to the non-SIT testing stages. So we talked about the LDSO, non-SIT LDSO testing, looking to commence earlier than was planned in the round 2 plan, where we had that testing completing in tranche 1 of qualification. We're now looking to bring that forward. So we are looking for LDSOs to be part of the SIT testing, but for all other LDSOs, we're looking to start a phase of qualification equivalent testing, or testing that will result in qualification being enabled ahead of the N10 and M11 milestones. And as Jason mentioned earlier, so what we're looking to do is, having obtained some confidence from the cycle 1 testing, we'll look to execute from the beginning of cycle 2 of SIT on the 2nd of July. The testing is likely to involve some functional migration, NFT and ops related objectives, but we're going to be defining what that testing is alongside the qualification working group. And then that will run through until the 24th of January 25. In addition to that, seem to have lost the screen. I don't know if that's the same for anyone else.
Yeah, it's gone down again.
Yeah.
We're just, I'm sure Joe's struggling slightly.
Hi, Dominic, it's Hazel again. Can I ask another question?
Yeah, go for it.
So if a party goes through SIT with one of their MPIDs, is the expectation the programme that they do the other MPIDs through this non-SIT sort of additional phase, this other phasing testing phase? Or if they go through SIT, that's them, in a sense, they pass the assurance and the testing phase?
Jason, can I pass that question on to you? If you don't mind.
You can. I think we'll need to discuss that, the qualification working group, to be honest, Hazel, because I don't think we've been around that yet. It's on our hit list.
We need to develop that principle around that. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So then we're looking at the UIT testing. So once we've achieved the core systems code freeze, then we'll be looking to trigger the end-to-end sandbox execution from the 22nd of October 24. So the end-to-end sandbox is an opportunity for participants to run any additional testing outside of the SIT scope. It's an opportunity to possibly run any internal UAT. It could be an option for completing the execution of your DBT2 scope, but yeah, that will kick off from there, and then that end-to-end sandbox testing stage will be supported for quite a long period out out of the end of qualification testing as well. So if you're in a late tranche of qualification testing, there'll still be some additional time for you to carry out any additional end-to-end sandbox testing. And then once we've got to the point where we've concluded SIT functional testing for the end of, for the MVC, and we've completed sufficient migration testing, NFT and operational testing, we'll be looking to kick off the qualification execution from the 20th of January 25. I think, yeah. If there's no further questions, I think we can probably move on, Giles.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dom. Jason, I think this is over to you just to pick up on qualification, which I know we sort of referenced quite a lot as we've been through previous
I'm
sections.
conscious of time as well, Giles. So I think there are 4 key elements to qualification. I think Dom's led in quite well for both for 2, which is the evidence of PIT. We will expect PIT evidence to be provided for qualification as well as SIT. I'll apologise for any background noise if my dog is wailing. I'll apologise for that. It's not me. So that will apply to qualification as well as to SIT. Evidence of DBT2 testing is something that we've looked at in the SIT working group. We'll have to consider how that and whether that applies to DNOs, but it is something we're looking at in the SIT and qualification working groups, and exactly what evidence we might need for DBT2 testing, which is around consequential change. And the 4th is the actual testing for qualification. So if you've executed SIT, you will have equivalence for this. And if you're in that non-SIT, this is the scope of testing that's in that bar at the bottom on Dom's previous plan. So importantly, just around the responsibilities, it will be the responsibility of the code bodies to execute qualification, and that's right. That's the right thing to do. It will be their performance assurance boards who ultimately approve that participants are in a fit state to come into the market and have passed all the relevant tests. The first bullet in here is the procedural and governance element. So that's the self-assessment documentation that's required for qualification. That can take some time. So you'll see in the plan that we are intending to allow people to start their SAD development, SAD submissions straight after the code has been approved for qualification. So if you move on to the next slide, please, Joe. And these are the activities that are sitting in the plan that cover what I've just talked through. The first bar is a very long qualification testing preparation board band that has got a number of activities underneath it, importantly, including the qualification testing approach and plan that is currently in development and seeking to be approved in May this year. So just in the interest of time, I'll just whistle through Giles and then take any questions at the end if needs be.
Yeah, thank
you. So there is also a code drafting element in the plan, and I'll concentrate on what's changed in round 3, I think, just for expediency, because I think you've seen the code drafting activities before in round 2 of the plan. The change for round 3 is off the back of change request 12, which has included the drafting for consequential change items into the scope of the drafting activities in the programme. So we're expecting code bodies who are responsible for consequential change to agree the solutions for those consequential change items, and then our drafting will reflect that into the codes. And that's simpler for industry as a whole, because it means that we can control it in one release and one set of code updates. So it should be easier for all of you to then digest those code changes, and we will approve them under the CCAG within the programme. And if you move to the next slide, Joe, that's reflected in the new set of code drafting under topic I, consequential change, in here. So we've introduced an additional cycle of code drafting to cover that, and that has pushed out to the M6 delivery date, the final drafting of code by about 8 weeks from round 2. So that's now in April. As Giles said right at the beginning, it's not on the critical path. We've got plenty of float for code drafting activities. So we are confident that we can deliver the plan as a whole with that pushed out. And the key dependency from M6 is the start of the qualification SAD process. You're starting to fill in the self-assessment document, as I discussed earlier. Joe, I think that's yes. I'm not going to dwell on this. This is just a standard life cycle for code drafting. Again, I think you've seen this before in previous replans, so I won't dwell on this, Joe, and move on. Shall I just? I don't think there's any hands up, Giles, at this point.
No, I don't think there are any questions for Jason. Otherwise, we'll move on quite swiftly, just conscious of time. Yeah, thanks, Jason. Aid, over to you on migration.
Okay, afternoon, everyone. Adrian Page, SI lead on the half-hourly programme, and conscious that we've only got 10 minutes of the call left. So we'll probably do similar to Jason and just pull out a few key things on here. So obviously migration stage is having completed either SIT or gone through qualification. Energy suppliers are in a position to start migrating their MPANs. The method and methodology that we're using to do this is being developed through 2 working groups, which I'd flag up. One being the migration design group, which is led by John Wiggins, and that's looking at the design, including reverse migration. Last meeting of that was yesterday, and doing what it says on the tin, making sure we have a clear design that's understood. And I know that's obviously relevant to a number of parties on this call today. And then the other working group is the migration working group, and that has been led by Carly Ward. It's going to be led by John Wiggins as well going forward, where we're picking up the approach and the strategy and the data assessment, and how we'll go about all of those activities is being developed through that working group. If that's probably that slide, if we just move on, these are all in the implementation approach, by the way, these slides as is. What we have been doing in parallel with agreeing the design is trying to look at what that migration model would look like. This is what's moved the timeline out from 12 months to 18 months. And I think we've said a couple of these things already, but just very quickly on the left-hand side there, the 3 stages to migration, which is fairly standard. There's an initial ramp up, which will be a slow and steady start of people starting to migrate meters. This will come out of parties that have been successful in the SIT MVC. That first few months, as we said earlier, we'd want all of the LDSOs to have passed their non-SIT testing there, so that we have no geographic restrictions. And we've put a high level assumption in that we've got a number of parties have been through SIT, and therefore we've got plenty of NPANs to select from for that migration, or the energy suppliers have. We'll then have full steam ahead with regard to migration. We'll see that from both people that have been through SIT MVC, SIT, and also the qualification parties coming through. As ever with a migration, there'll be a tail, and that'll leave the third element, which will be the ramp down and the what is usually the difficult ones. So these will be the remaining NPANs. We've written that through as 18 months. As I say, we've shared the model behind this at the migration working group, and we will provide an update today as well on this at that group with a number of the more detailed assumptions that we're making. And in my very quick update here, if we just race to the third slide, which brings us back to the POAP. We've got 2 lines on there for migration. The first line showing those parties that have been through SIT. So the earliest will be April 25, where people are migrating their meters. That will be the parties that have been through SIT MVC. I'd imagine over the following X months, further parties will come in and start their migration. And as Giles said earlier, that gives people 18 months now to migrate their meters. If you've been through qualification, parties will come in at the back end of September 25 and have got 12 months to do qualification, or even less because of the different tranches of people coming through. So very much an incentive for parties to take part in SIT and have a longer period to migrate. That's probably the 2-minute version of migration. I think, Jason, it's probably useful just to say something about, sorry, can we just go back one? Just to say something about M16 here.
Yeah, it's probably less applicable for the DNO community, but M16 is switching on the new settlement timetable, and we have changed our approach to M16 in this version of in round 3 of the replan. We've got a window of 6 months for approval of M16 after a 2-month period after the end of migration. And the reason for that is we want to concentrate on M16 being a set of criteria that are met to prove stable operation of MHHS before we turn on the new settlement timetable. So we don't want to be driven by a time, we want to be driven by a set of criteria. And the reason we've put a window is because we want to make sure there's a backstop to it and we're not continuing to run parallel systems for longer than needs be. So that's the rationale for the window for M16 that's in the round 3 of the replan.
Okay, thanks, Jason. And on that, if you just want to skip one, Joe, just to pull out a couple of things on here. This is in parallel with meters being migrated and the transition over to the new timeline. We need to make sure these activities have happened or are happening. So we need, as it says in the top box there, parties to have service management solutions in place, recognising that we've got both the need to move and support the new model, but there'll be a transition period where people are migrating across, and with reverse migration, we're going to have both old and new service management arrangements in place. And also just wanted to highlight on here around live data, and in the transition team under John Wiggins, that we'll be doing some work making sure that we've got the quality of data required for that transition to occur, and that will be part of the data assessment activity that will go to MWG. But with only 5 minutes to go and no hands up, I'll probably very quickly hand back to you, Giles, to see if there's any generic questions and to wrap up.
Thank you, Aid, and thank you all for your inputs there. So we probably just got just 2 or 3 minutes for any final questions on any of the phases that we've just done a very quick whistle-stop tour through. So are there any open questions from anybody? Okay, I just see a hand go up. Catherine.
Hi, just to say, as we said at the beginning, could we just do a sense check that any issues or risks that have been flagged during this call will make it onto that risk and issues list that's going to be circulated by Monday in preparation for the Thursday meeting? That'd be appreciated.
Yes, we will, Catherine. Thank you.
I have put something in the chat earlier on in the conversation. It was just a fallout from a meeting pre-Christmas regarding a step that probably needs to be put into the plan regarding assurances that our GEOS billing won't be adversely impacted. It's how we run our businesses and is very important in terms of customer billing for us.
Great. Dom, do you want to say anything to that at this point? Dom?
Sorry, Giles.
Yeah, do you want to respond to that in any way at this point, or is that something for next week?
I think we should bring it up next week, yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't think there are any further hands up, so it just leaves me to thank everybody for their time this morning. I hope you found this a useful session. Certainly, we really appreciate the questions on our side, and it allows us just to make sure that, and if there's an extra sense check, that we are covering all the right areas. We will plan for the meeting next week, as just mentioned. Again, as mentioned at the start, all the materials today that you've seen and the recording will be published onto the collaboration website, or portal, I should say. You will, at the end of this call, as I mentioned at the start, you'll see that the recording is available. I'm afraid, as I mentioned, that's a limitation of Teams. It won't be available to everybody externally off our systems because it sits behind the firewall. But we will work very quickly to get this material published. So I think with that, with 2 minutes to go, I think we'll close the call there. Thank you again, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.